noticed there was traces of radioactivity due to a light company in the early 20th century illegally dumping waste here. Now, the project has picked up again and they successfully excavated it. Will hopefully be finished in the next 2 years. But now we are approaching our first bridge of the day, Lakeshore Drive. Lakeshore Drive is our coastal highway. You can take it all the way down to Hyde Park on the south side, 53rd Street. Or you can take it all the way to the north side, Hollywood Avenue. Great way to get out of downtown, get wonderful views of Lake Michigan, excellent views of our skyline as well. But now, you may think of this bridge as sort of being an entrance to that classroom of architecture I referenced earlier. It's a wonderful photo opportunity as we travel down the main branch of the Chicago River. And we're actually going to start by taking a look at one of Chicago's newest projects, just ahead of us on the left, planted in the reflective turquoise glass. This will be called Vista Tower, hopefully finished about a year from now. The bottom will be a high-end hotel, residential condos all the way to the top. But let's talk about the structure. You'll notice it looks like 3 whimsical hourglasses. That final hourglass is topped out at just over 1,100 feet, making it currently the 3rd tallest building in the city of Chicago. This project's being done by architect Jeannie Gay out of Studio Gay. And upon completion, it will stand as the world's tallest building by a female-owned architectural firm. We're going to take a look at another Jeannie Gay building in just a moment. But for now, I'm going to bring your attention to the building directly ahead of us, Trump International Hotel and Tower, completed in 2009 by architect Adrian Smith of Skidmore, Owen, and Merrill. It's an example of a style of architecture we're going to see quite a bit of today that's contemporary, known as contextualism, for the way in which that blue glass is not only able to reflect its surroundings, but acknowledge them. Check this out. If you look at these black bands, there's actually something really unique about them. That first black band or set back there is the same exact height as the Wrigley building with the clock tower on it. That second black band up there is the same exact height as Mather Tower, which is a skinny bullet structure just across the river. And then finally, that third black band or set back up there is the same exact height as that black box structure behind it, the AMA building. So this is architect Adrian Smith's way of paying his respects to 3 different styles of architecture that existed before him. It's currently the 2nd tallest building in Chicago. Moving over to the left side of the river, you'll notice this building with cladded alternating dark and light blue glass, essentially looks like a giant Toblerone bar, is known as the Swiss Hotel, completed in 1989 by architect Harry Weiss. And just behind it is this building with the wavy fins coming out the sides of it. It's known as Aqua Tower, also completed by architect Jeannie Gay in 2009. I actually want everybody, as we get another angle of the tower, to take a look at the way in which that reflective glass is sequenced along those fins. It almost gives the appearance of water cascading down the side of it. But let's actually talk about those fins, because they're actually balconies. And no 2 balconies on this building are the same. In fact, when Jeannie Gay was mapping out the sides of this structure, they had GPS-tracked laser pointers running up there so that they could mathematically calculate where to install the balcony, ensuring that everybody who lived there had their very own slice of Chicago, a view that no one else in the city can say that they have. Jeannie Gay is a genius, and I'm not just saying that because I subjectively admire her. She's actually a part of the MacArthur Fellowship. She won the MacArthur grant, which literally certifies one as a genius. Hey, let's say hello to Andre the Bubble Guy, everybody. He's an awesome dude. I highly, highly recommend you say hello to him after the tour. So just ahead of us is one of Chicago's most iconic buildings. Ahead of us on the right with the clock tower. It's known as the Wrigley Building. It was completed in 1924 by the firm Graham, Anderson, Probst, and White. You see, a lot of people tell me when they look at this building that they feel as though they're being transported back to Europe. And in a way, they would be correct. You see, the late 19th, early 20th century, Chicago, America, we were still searching for our own architectural identity. So we borrowed from countries where it was been successful, like France and Spain. In fact, the Wrigley building is loosely modeled after a cathedral in Seville, Spain, and wants a Spanish revival architecture on at the top. But what really sets this building apart from others is the smooth finish along the sides of it. It's cladded in a material that's known as glazed terracotta, which is essentially a baked clay, and there are actually over 250,000 different tiles of glazed terracotta. As the London House, an exclusive hotel. However, when it was built in 1924, it was known as the London Guarantee, one of Chicago's most famous jazz clubs. I actually now want to point out on the Michigan Avenue Bridge, you'll notice Chicago's flag with the blue and white stripes and 4 red stars. Those 4 red stars each represent important moments in our history. That first red star represents Fort Dearborn, which was located right here on what is today Michigan Avenue in 1803, and was attacked by the British during the War of 1812. The second red star represents the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Third and fourth red stars, 1893, 1933 World's Fairs, which were both respectively held here in Chicago. Getting back to some structures, I want to guide your attention to this decadent building here on the left that almost looks like a wedding cake with the box, rectangle, and ornamented dome structure atop of it. It's known as the Jewelers Building. It was completed in 1926. In fact, upon completion, it stood as the world's tallest building for a brief moment in time. Now, it gets the name for all the important jewelry it housed during the 1920s, but I realize we're in Chicago. This building's from the 20s. I'm a tour guide. It's sort of my civic duty to tell everybody at least one Al Capone story, right? So I will, and it involves the Jewelers Building. 1920s, Prohibition is going on, right? The sale and production of alcohol is illegal. I put air quotes around that because big cities like Chicago, well, we found a way to get our drink on. Mainly through what are known as speakeasies, these undercover bars or lounges that popped up throughout the city. Take a look at that dome structure. That was a speakeasy, known as the Stratosphere Lounge, owned and operated by none other than Al Brown Capone himself. Moving over to the right side of the river, these 2 tan towers introduce themselves, known as Marina City, or as us Chicagoans endearingly refer to them as the Corncob Towers, right? For obvious reasons. But what's actually more important than their unique design is their purpose. You see, these were built as condos and apartments in the 1960s, and they still are today. However, during the 1950s and 60s, nobody was living in downtown Chicago. It was smelly, industrialized. The thought was you worked, not lived here. Well, that bothered architects like Bertrand Goldberg, who built this. You see, he wanted to find out, what does it take for people to move, not only back to Chicago, but downtown Chicago? So when he built Marina City, he essentially had this concept of a city within a city. Check this out. Over here on the right. In the 1960s, where you live, you could dock your boat. Afterwards, eat at a fancy restaurant. Of course, park your car. There was even a bowling alley, movie theater, and shopping center all within the same building. I think this was built with introverts in mind. Nonetheless, very successful, as it attracted people to move once again to downtown Chicago. Now, when I mentioned, just decades ago, nobody wanted to live in downtown Chicago, well, as we continue along our tour, I argue that this popular narrative along the river would not have been possible had it not been for architects, borderline sociologists like Bertrand Goldberg. Just ahead of us on the right is this red brick building with a clock on it slowly revealing itself to us, known as the Burnham building. Completed in 1914 by Chicago architect George C. Nimitz. Now, this is an example of another popular style of architecture made right here in the Midwest, known as Prairie style architecture. Prairie style architecture is best described as buildings that are low, set to the horizon. Much like the prairies you'll find throughout the Midwest. In fact, you'll notice architects love to mimic the geography in which they build. However, as we float by this wonderful structure, I want everybody to check this out. It appears to be an even or symmetrical building. But upon further investigation, you will discover it's actually asymmetrical or uneven. You'll see what I mean here. Using that clock tower in the middle as a reference, you'll be able to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bay windows on the left side, while 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bay windows on the right. Well, when this was first built, it was symmetrical until the city of Chicago just, cut a slab of it off while widening the LaSalle Street Bridge ahead of us in the 1920s. But I actually want you to check out above the clock, it reads Britannica. That's because currently the Encyclopedia of Britannica is housed inside of this building. And I often have a lot of kids going, what? What is that invention? Encyclopedias are essentially physical Wikipedias in book form with real facts too. Imagine that, made right here inside the Repurposing. Speaking of facts, I have a fun fact for everybody. Did you know that the birthplace of the modern day skyscraper is right here in Chicago? And it was designed by a style of architecture that's referred to today as the New Chicago School. And coincidentally, if you look ahead of us on the right, you'll see this red brick building that says the Chicago School on it is actually a great representation of what the design of the world's first skyscraper looks like. This is known as a tripartite facade, which breaks down like this. Hunkered down gray base, elongated red brick middle, ornamented capital. This is similar to a Roman column. Well, the idea of a Roman column is actually the basic inspiration behind the design of the world's first skyscraper right here in Chicago. Guys, get your cameras ready, as we're going to have a spectacular view of this monstrous building here on the right, known as Merchandise Mart. Completed in 1930 by Graham Anderson Post and White, it stood as the world's largest building, 4.2 million square feet. That's 73 football fields you can fit in there for reference. In fact, it had its very own zip code, 60654. Now, it shares that zip code with the surrounding buildings today. But what's important about this building is it's a great example of a popular style of architecture during the roaring 1920s known as Art Deco. Here are some characteristics of Art Deco expressed right here on the side of the merchandise mart we're going to check out together. Starting with those dark inset windows that give the appearance of pinstripes running alongside of it. These pinstripes, of course, guide your eyes to the top, where you'll notice the setbacks like stairs, detailed ornamentation, the cladding of this and many of the other Art Deco buildings we see today, limestone from Indiana. When you throw all these things together, you truly do capture both the cultural and economic prosperity from the 1920s as seen through our design. Speaking of economic prosperity, feast your eyes on this Y-shaped intersection here on the river known as Wolf Point. What's up, Javier? This is home to the most contemporary and modern architecture in the city of Chicago. And no better building to check out first than this building directly ahead of us on the helm of Wolf Point, known as River Point. Completed in 2017 by the firm Picard in Chilton. It's probably the best example of that contemporary style of architecture I mentioned earlier, contextualism. Not only does it reflect its surroundings, it literally blends into them, transforming depending on the time of the day or weather. Moving over here to the right side of the river, we'll notice this glossy turquoise tower known as Wolf Point West, which was completed in 2016 and is 48 stories of apartments. And I mentioned that Wolf Point, right, this is real estate. These are apartments. You might be curious, how much does it cost to live around here? I don't want to break any hearts, but one bedroom here averages out around $5,000 a month. A 3-bedroom, around $10,000 a month. So needless to say, Kyle, the tour guide / teacher, does not live in this building. Okay, take a look at this building directly ahead of us that looks like a rustic box. Guys, you're looking at the oldest structure we're going to see on this tour today, known as Fulton House. It was completed in 1898 by architect Frank Abbott, and upon completion it stood as a giant freezer. That's right, you would find many giant freezers just like it throughout the city of Chicago during that time, as we were the meat packing capital of the world. We were known as the city of broad shoulders. Just a few miles southwest of where we're floating right now in our back of the yards neighborhood The meat would be butchered, slaughtered, and then sent over to a giant freezer, just like Fulton House, where it's kept fresh and preserved. Now, you'll notice that today Fulton House is not a giant freezer. They're actually condos. In 1981, architect Harry Weiss repurposed them to be just that. And the story goes that when workers were knocking holes into the sides of these walls to make way for the windows, they discovered that the walls were 4 feet thick, insulated with horsehair and cork. In fact, it took 6 months alone for the building to thaw out. Another Harry Weiss design is actually located just next to Fulton House in the form of those zany little river cottages completed in 1983. Check out the sides. As we get closer to them, the entire side will be revealed. It has that triangular shape. It's actually meant to look like a sailboat. And if you look closer, you'll notice circular windows that are reminiscent to portholes on a boat. Well, as it turns out, Harry Weiss was not just an architect. He was actually in the Navy, and he loved to sail. So this is him playfully expressing his nautical personality through these river cottages he built in 1983. Now, in addition to being very unique, they're also very popular. There are 4 units here, 3 of which are still held by the original owners. One of those units went on the market just a few years ago and sold immediately for $2.25 million. More real estate development will be found just past these trees in the Kinsey Street Bridge on the left, in the form of what are known as the Kinsey Townhomes, which, before construction even began in 2002, every single unit was sold out. If you're curious again how much, well, the townhouses along the river, anywhere from 2.3 to 2.8 million. Chicago is back on the map. But there's one more element important from the city of Chicago we know today, and it's the man who designed this fair. His name is Daniel Burnham. Not only was the fair a mad success, but he fell in love with Chicago. And who can blame him? He envisioned a city that would be able to sustainably handle that influx of population we received between the 1870s and 1920s. He actually had a vision for Chicago to be a Paris on the Prairie. And what I mean by that is a city that is urban but also acknowledges the natural environment in which we were built upon. Chicago is a very green city, and what I mean by that, we have lots of public spaces and parks. I have lived in 7 different neighborhoods in Chicago, and I can tell you that in each one of those neighborhoods, I've always been within walking distance to a public space or park. The city belongs to everybody. These parks also act as a clean lung, dividing industry from the people, so that our city would never be dominated by privately owned, smelly factories. And you have to admit, Chicago is pretty clean for being the 3rd largest city in America. You know what else belongs to everybody? Our lakefront. We have a zoning ordinance here. You are not allowed to build privately east of Lakeshore Drive. It's why we have over 27 miles of beaches, parks, trail fronts that are available to everybody. So I argue to you this afternoon, had it not been for that fire, the fair, and Daniel Burnham, we wouldn't have this opportunity to acknowledge what are best described as the 3 crown jewels of our skyline. Starting with the first crown jewel that will be slowly revealing itself to us here on the right is this tan building with the triangular formation at the top, with setbacks like stairs leading up to it, and finally that statue on top of it that looks like an Oscar. This is known as the Board of Trade. It was completed in 1930 by architects Oliver and Cruz. Let's talk about that statue. It has a name. Ceres, named after the Roman goddess of grain and agriculture, which is appropriate because that is exactly what the Board of Trade exchanges, commodities and futures of grain and agriculture. Let's now focus our attention on the stars of our show here on the South Ridge. That black building with 2 white antennas and the pink one in front of it. You may think of these as the king and queen chess pieces of the South Branch River. And let's start with the queen piece, which is cladded in pink granite from Texas, leading up to what resembles a crown on the top of the form of those 5 barrels. This is known as 311 lacquer, and it was completed in 1990. Let's discuss those 5 barrels up there. Those are actually housing over 1,500 LED lights, which really makes the building stand apart from others at night especially. You know what? I don't blame the architects for trying to find something to make this building stand out, especially when you're situated right in front of that black building with the white antennas behind it. The Willis or Sears Tower, or as I like to call him, Mr. Tall, Dark, and Handsome. It was built in 1974 and stood as the world's tallest building for over 24 years. It clocks in at a whopping 1,451 feet. That's 442 meters by metric system, not including the antennas. Still the tallest building in Chicago. If you're curious, what is the tallest building in the world? That would be the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. And to give you some perspective as to how tall the Burj Khalifa is, well, sure, the Sears Willis Tower is pretty tall, right? Well, imagine it being twice as tall. That would only clear the height of the Burj Khalifa by just a few hundred feet. Now, I will do a humble brag for Chicago. The architect behind the Burj Khalifa is Chicago's very own Adrian Smith of Skidmore, Owen, and Maryland. But now we are going to have this complete of the Sears Willis Tower.
That's cool. That makes a lot of sense.
If you take a look, it essentially looks like 9 individual columns or bundles like this. And there's actually a wonderful story behind the conception of this design, which involves the architect's forefathers who built it. One Bruce Graham of Skidmore, Owen, and Merrill. And there's going to be a wonderful photo opportunity of Mr. Tall, Dark, and Handsome right in between the gap of these 2 buildings here on the right. You'll see it in all of its glory. And while you're looking at the top, you'll notice 4 glass boxes hanging off the side of it, which is known as Skydeck. And for a price of admission, you too can stand on those glass boxes and see Chicago in all of its glory. But let me warn you, it's kind of scary. I think of it, nature programmed these biological alarm clocks in our head that are set to go off when we feel like we're dying. Those might go off up there. Although I'm a little biased to my description, the first time I went up there about 4 years ago with my 8th grade class on a field trip, I was standing on the glass box when the flight was windy and started violently jumping up and down on the glass box, causing it to shake. Let's just say biological alarm clocks were triggered, and I might have said some words I promise not to repeat on this festival. Hey, it's clearing up, and if you go up there on a clear day, you can actually see 4 states up there. Isn't that pretty incredible? One spot, 4 states. Those 4 states, of course, include. What's up, Tom? I know everybody out here. I got it like that. Those 4 states, of course, include Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Hawaii. Hey, we're clearing Adams Street Bridge right here. This marks the beginning of Route 66 right here on Adams and Wacker here in Chicago. If you want, you can of course take that route continuously with lots of sideshow attractions all the way to California. You also may have noticed here on the left that there are several trains running underneath the west side of the South Branch of the river. This allows me to describe a very controversial zoning ordinance here in Chicago known as air rights. If you want to build above these trains right here, you need to lease out the air above them. Yes, the air for $2.3 million a year, up to 99 years. It's known as air rights. Getting back to some buildings, let's look ahead of us on the right. We'll see this brown building with the serrated edges in the corners of its towers, known as the Mercantile Exchange, which was built in the 1980s to accommodate that huge boom of trading commodities. And if you know anything about trading commodities in the 1980s, you would need these open floor plans known as trading pits, in which runners can wave signals on what to buy and what to sell, making eye contact with one another. The problem for architects and constructions the ways of those columns install, and then gather the towers to stand vertically still. You may think of these training pits as metaphorical hammocks being suspended between those two towers. This was accomplished by architects Ugi, Jawa, and Johnson in 1983. Moving from one engineering wonder to another, let's check out this unique blue and gray structure ahead of us on the left, which if you look at the top, you'll notice the Boeing airplane corporate sign up there just below the clock, as this is currently the home of Boeing Airplanes corporate headquarters. But I mentioned it features this engineering wonder. Check this out. On the lower half of the building, you'll notice these white trapezoids here. Those are actually trusses. And due to the trains below, they are suspending the southwest corner of this building over the trains and water below. You may think of those trusses as essentially acting as anchors, suspending the building being the close. This was accomplished by architects Perkins and Will in 1990 when it was first erected. It was actually home to Salt, which has been currently relocated to River Point at the helm of Moving over to the right side of the river, you'll check out one of Chicago's newest developments along the river, which just got underway about a year and a half ago. This is going to be the headquarters of Bank of America here in Chicago, and when it is finished, it will stand at 800 feet. It will be completed by architects Getch Partners, the same geniuses who gave us 150 North Riverside. What's really unique about floating by this building during its current phase is we can check out these V support beams right here. There's a reason they are here. Chicago has a zoning ordinance. If you are to build along the river these days, you must do so at least 30 feet off of it and provide a public space or plaza, which is exactly what we featured right here along the south branch of the river when completed in just over a year from now if everything goes as planned. I'm letting them borrow my boat for the day. Okay, so I mentioned that zoning ordinance that buildings have to be 30 feet off of it. It's another reason to appreciate 150 North Riverside. The reason it has that 45-degree angle at the bottom is not just for aesthetic. It's because they had to do it to provide that public space or plaza you see right there. So a lot of people obviously flock downtown during Chicago summers. Why not? So there's also another time that a lot of folks head to downtown Chicago, and that would be St. Patrick's Day. It is quite the sight to behold, as Chicago has a large Irish heritage, but more importantly, we dyed the main branch of the river this brilliant Kelly green. In fact, the Plumbers Union dyes the river off of the boat we are on right now. They would be on the back of the boat, and they spray this orange substance that's actually used to check for cracks in plumbing. Once it makes contact with the water, it transforms into that brilliant Kelly green. I will point out it is biodegradable and dissipates after just about 36 hours. Over here on the right, we have this brick building with the ivy on it, the Great Lakes building it is today, but if you go back to the 1800s, it stood on this land known as the Bingham Convention Center, where the National Republican Convention was held that allowed Abraham Lincoln to eventually ascend to his presidency. So we've now returned at Wolf Point, right? This Y-shaped intersection on the river. This gives us a chance to check out this wonderful curved structure here on the right that looks beautiful as ever at this time of day. Cladded in alternating turquoise and green glass. It's known as 333 Blacker, completed in 1983 for the new Veen building. You know, this was actually voted by Chicagoans as our favorite building for several years. I believe that's due to the glass at the time, which again mimics the color and texture of the Chicago River. But Chicago is also huge fans of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And if you are too, you should know that his dad's office was in this building as it overlooked the parade going on in Chicago. Just below 333 Blacker is this awesome river walk right here. You can see the lawn chairs on it, which is relatively new in Chicago's history. This was actually, work began on it about 10, 15 years ago, and this slab that was completed 2 years ago connects Lake Street all the way to Lake Michigan, meaning you can walk uninterrupted along this riverwalk for 1.3 miles with a lot of different things to do. But more importantly, it expresses the growing relationship between Chicago's people and its river. You know, in the 1900s, we ceased to treat it as an open sewer. 1972, the Clean Water Act was passed. We actually started cleaning it out. But currently in Chicago, we have a zoning ordinance. If you want to build along the river these days, you must do so being LEED certified, which stands for a Leader of Energy Efficient Design. In fact, the Chicago school building ahead of us on the left is LEED certified, and one of its functions is to actually take in the water, filter it, and put it out in a pure form, which is perfect because if you look here on the right, you'll see those floating jetties with vegetation on top and the metal poles. Well, below that are fish hotels, where if you're walking along the riverwalk here, you might just see a few baby fish hanging out. But this also reveals the exploding biodiversity in our river. In 1979, we were quoted as having 12 species of fish in here. That number has swelled to over 71. And you can think of that explosion of biodiversity revealing the ever-improving health of our river. That said, do not swim in the Chicago River. It's illegal. I know it looks tantalizing sometimes on hot days, but the city of Chicago does say that it will be recreational ready in 10 years. Not sure how the logistics of that will play out. One more bit about these bridges. Do they still open? Yes. Not as much as they did in the late 19th, early 20th century, but they do open during the fall and spring times of the year on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 10:30 a.m. only. This is to allow sailors and other large vessels bring their boats out from dry dock, masts and all, out to Lake Michigan for the summer season. If you can imagine seeing these different vessels pass through Chicago's canyon of architecture, it is quite the sight to behold. Also, this is a little subjective, but I kind of find some joy out of people that are now late for work because when the bridges go up, it makes a lot of people angry. Kind of messes up the logistics of things. But it is cool to just see that rat race in Chicago stop for just a moment. And as soon as those bridges are lowered, it picks up right again. And we're actually going to pick right back up with some architecture focusing on the right side of the river. Specifically this glossy building that's intercepted by slabs of horizontal and vertical concrete, which is known as 77 Whacker. This was completed in 1990 by Spanish architect Repurposing. Its most important feature is that neoclassically inspired Greek Parthenon found at the top of it. If you've been inspired by some of the architecture you've seen today, I highly recommend you check out some of the lobbies, specifically 77 Whackers. It's stunning. It personally gave me a whole new perspective of the structure as a whole. Just next to 77 Whacker is that short brown building that says 55 on it, cleverly named 55 Whacker. It's actually an example of another popular style of architecture during the 1960s and 70s known as brutalism. Brutalism has this idea of strong, rigid, reinforced concrete paired with small black windows and to give off a sense of safety and security. But I've also developed a nickname for this building just for the way it's so short and angry. And I call it the Danny DeVito of architecture. It's like short and angry between two tall supermodels. Come on. That supermodel to the left of it that had the tic-tac-toe formations going up is known as the Leo Burnett building. It was completed in 1990, named after famous advertising guru Leo Burnett. He brought us such ads as Tony the Tiger, Snack Crackle Pop, the Marlboro Man, the Green Giant. And in 1990, Chicago named this gray giant building after him. Those final two at the top, it shall stand as the world's tallest building. That is the story behind the conception of its design. But I need to address some tension. You might be like, why is he even calling it the Willis Sears Tower? Ain't it just the Willis Tower? Well, it was renamed the Willis Tower about 10 years ago, which pretty much broke the heart of all of Chicago because it was always known as the Sears Tower. So, if you find yourself in a conversation with a local and you're discussing the Sears Willis Tower,